That was me.
Okay.
So Desta, you're far techier than I am. I have those options because this is.
Oh, make Desta the host. Sinead, make Desta the host.
Yeah, but
Yeah, because
how?
I'm only the co-host. You have to make me the actual host.
The host, yeah,
And
make
I
her the
thought me
host.
logging in was the thing that did that, but it didn't.
Well,
because
it
you're
does.
still the
It does
co-host.
because I always make you the host. So
I have to be the real host, yeah.
yeah. So try that. Just make her the host, and then we'll go from there.
I don't have the option to make her the host, which is strange because normally it's right there, but I'm not seeing that. Oh, hang on a second.
Desta, more. You go to more.
Okay,
beside her name.
I got it. So Desta, I'm
host?
making you the host now.
Okay.
It should show up.
Oh, yeah, okay, so now it does.
Awesome.
So,
Okay, so those options are now showing up on the bottom of your screen.
yeah,
Choose-
yeah,
okay,
I got it.
Perfect.
So I will, I'll try and log in here. Hold on to YouTube.
And am I recording on my end or no?
Yep.
I am. Okay.
Well, Nicole is recording.
Okay.
I only made, I didn't know who else
Okay.
wanted to record. Hold
Okay.
on.
Yeah, you really don't need to Sinead because
Okay.
Nicole and Desta we can get a copy from.
Okay, well, but it's live, so I don't record because.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not-
that's right. That's right.
yeah,
That's
just-
right.
it
It's live.
automatically goes onto the live file in
Okay.
YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, so live on YouTube, and then I'll go to Grant's thing, and then I'll post it in the chat as well for everyone.
Okay.
And this always happens a little bit faster than I think, but I'll tell you when I think it's live,
Okay.
because it should be any second now.
No worries, Desta. We couldn't do this without you, so take your time.
I think it's maybe live now, but we'll wait until it tells me it is, but I think it is now. All right, that's it, Grant.
Gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go.
That's me.
Our host today is Nicole and Sinead. Take it away, Nicole.
Hi, Grant. Hi, Sinead. Well, everybody, today we have amassed quite a number of experiencers for this panel today. And our topic of discussion is UFOs and out-of-body experiences. So today we've brought to our guest panel list Wendy Gallant, Ron Johnson, Preston Dennett, Gerard Pratt, Nancy Tremaine, and Karen. I'm not sure of your last name, so I'll just call you Karen. And they're all going to share their experiences and their thoughts on the relationship between UFOs and their out-of-body experiences. So I'm going to turn it over to Sinead really quickly, and she can give a little introduction, and Grant's going to present a slideshow, and we'll introduce everybody as they go along.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everybody. So we're very, very glad to have a wonderful panel of people here today, and we're hoping that's going to benefit the audience who is tuning in on this very interesting combination of topics. It would seem a combination of topics, but maybe they are one and the same thing. OBEs and ET experiences / abductions. So we're talking mainly about the connection between those two things. There are several people here who have had varying degrees of experience with both of those. Some people have had multiple OBEs, multiple abduction experiences, and we're talking about how those experiences are perceived specifically within the idea of consciousness and the fact that, you know, this reality that we think is reality may not actually be reality. So are we going from inside reality to outside something else, or are we already outside and we're going inside where we truly live in our consciousness? That is really the question. So we have here today Nancy Tremaine, who has some extensive experience with her own very detailed, incredible history of experience and contact with ETs, with abductions, with being inside UFOs. She's written books. She's got a new one that just came out last year. And she certainly has a wealth of experience and knowledge to share with us. So Nancy, I thought we could start with you because you've had such varied and in-depth experience. Maybe you can give us, just to begin, a brief kind of synopsis for the audience who may not have heard of you, which would be incredible at this point because you're everywhere. But still, if you can give a synopsis of your experience and maybe a brief statement on what you think it could be, and then we'll go in more deeply to what we think that is later on. Oh, we can't hear you, Nancy. Can you unmute yourself?
Oops.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone. I'm thrilled to be among all of these hardcore experiencers, realizing that this is Earth School and our psychic and intuitive abilities have all been heightened because we have all had UFO experiences and past lives. And remembering our past lives, we've learned a lesson from each one of them. I have. I've experienced necromancy. Actually, the ability to, two of my friends that died, I knew at the exact moment that their souls were leaving their bodies. I knew. And sleep writing, which I don't walk in my sleep, but I got up sometime in the middle of the night and wrote words that I couldn't understand and that still baffled me. Well, should I read what I wrote in my sleep?
Yeah, that's a key thing in terms of what this may be about.
Yes.
This idea of what's really going on. That's what today's panel was about, is what's really going on. Once we get past the fact that UFOs exist, what's really going on. So read that passage that you wrote during the night.
This was November 29th of 2017, and I got up to my pad of paper and pen that I always have all over the apartment. I wrote, quote, "Realities or illusions are a part of the delusion we have created. We are living in a delusional illusion of our making. We are all players in this fictional theater we perform for our creators, a muse existing for our audience. The stage is set at birth and our performance has begun." Now I held on to this for 12 days before I sent it to Sir Grant and to Kevin Estrella. But besides these words, I had drawn a circle next to these words. It was my handwriting, so I knew I'd written it. It was scribbled all across the pad, not in the lines. And I had written words of consciousness, sound, energy. And I was made to understand that this circle depicted the womb that gave birth to humanity. And then in quotations, I had written the words, "the what is," and I understood the what is to be God or the cosmic mind. I guess I could talk about a really odd experience that I had. On August 12th, 2018, I had gone to the Buddhist monastery here in Battle Creek, Michigan, and spoken. And after I left, I became fixated with this symbol of the sunyata, which is, its meaning is emptiness, void of anything. But there's a little gap in that sunyata. And I saw that little gap as a way to escape into other dimensions or possibly realities. And exactly 1 week to the day after I left the Buddhist monastery, it was a Sunday, I can only explain it as if you've ever fainted and come to It was that feeling that I had come to from fainting. And I watched as my forearms started to materialize, to wrist, to hands, and to fingers. And I was actually watching myself being put back together. There was this fuzzy energy, these particles of atoms and molecules, like jigsaw pieces of a puzzle. And I was actually being put back together. And I felt my soul slip into my body. And I saw that my hands were gripping my steering wheel at the 10-2 position.
Thank you for bringing that up, Nancy, if you don't mind if I interject, because there's so much within these stories talking about how it raises the question of, when someone is abducted, for example, when they experience an abduction, is it actually a physical removal of the person, or do we think that we're being physically removed? Because there's this whole question of how physical is this experience and how energetic and vibrational is this experience. So
yeah, I had no idea, and I still have no idea where I was prior to this. So there was missing time. I only knew that I was driving my car and I was headed in a certain direction. And I focused on the road ahead. It's really weird because when you've been experiencing this high strangeness for so long, I just decided to let myself go with it. I could have pulled over on the side of the road, but I decided to just keep driving to see where this was going to take me. And it was like a dreamlike state, but it was irrational and surreal, but it was really happening. It was really happening. I drove for miles, and I passed homes and streets and trees, and I just kept going and going. And then all of a sudden, on my left-hand side, I see the local library, which is only 1 mile from where my apartment. So I had become self-aware and conscious of my own existence at that time, which is a basic connection between science and consciousness. And I call that a Samadhi experience. And past lives. And I want to thank Preston Dennett while I'm thinking of this, because I just wanted to thank you for, there was a time when I needed you and you called me, and I don't know if you remember, and you were kind enough to help me with some of the high strangeness I was going through. So thank you for that, and bless you. One of my clearest past lives is I was a man, and I was in a foxhole with another man. And next to this foxhole was a makeshift wooden hut that we had built for shelter. We watched as a missile was coming towards us. And we knew that we were going to die. And I had accepted it, but he was terrified. And I remember grabbing him close to me. And I said, we'll go together. You're not going to be alone. But when the missile hit, I felt this immediate pain. It only lasted for a second. And I imploded and body parts went everywhere. And I realized, and I believe the lesson that I learned is death is something you cannot share with anyone. It is something you have to do alone.
Can I just ask you, Nancy, did this feel like an OBE when you were having this experience, or was this a dream?
No, this is a memory of a past life.
A memory of, okay,
that I
so
had.
it just came spontaneously, or did this happen?
Well, what happened is it came right after I awakened in 2011, and I remember telling Dr. Harry Wellness and my regression therapist about this, a past life that I had, and other past lives that I've had. One in an iron lung. I remember being a young girl, maybe around the age of 9 years old, being in an iron lung. And I even told my mother about it. I remember the smell, the musty smell, and the loneliness and the fear that the electricity would go out. You have to think of that every second. And I told my mother, I don't know if I'd seen a picture or what, but I said, I was in that. I was in an iron lung. And she said, don't you think I would remember? I'm your mother. And I said, it was in another life. So I've always been aware of past lives. I have other past lives too that I remember. And I believe that the people that are put in our lives each time are the meant, I call them the meant to be's, and they're all put in your life for a purpose.
Let's go to Preston. You mentioned Preston. Let's get Preston because he's written a book on out-of-body experiences. So Preston, jump in here and give us maybe 5 minutes of your hour-and-a-half lecture on what do you think is the importance of the OBE in terms of the UFO experience?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I started having OBEs really precisely around the same time I started investigating UFOs. I don't think that's a coincidence. They kind of came hand in hand together at the same time. I kept pretty quiet about the OBEs because I was pretty much busy with the UFOs, but was having lots of experiences, which really kind of started as a result of my mom passing away in 1984. She was only 49 years old. It was a real shock. I was a complete skeptic of UFOs, life after death, ghosts, all of it. A couple of weeks, at the service actually for my mom, I saw her spirit as an apparition. Thought to myself, well, I am delirious with grief. I have lost my marbles. I didn't even think spirit or ghost. I just thought, wow, I am losing it. And it was not long after that, I started having a series of what I would call lucid dreams or pre-lucid, where she would come into my room, my mother, and I would wake up. I'd be like, wow, what are you doing here? I thought you were dead. What are you doing here? And she would just smile and kind of not speak so much, but say, everything's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And it kept happening. And it was very confusing to me because I would wake up for real after thinking I was awake. So this was kind of like a false awakening each time she came into my room. And I knew it was her. On some level, I knew it was her. The quality of her presence was there. It was her. But I couldn't reconcile it because there was no such thing as life after death. So I was really confused. And after it happened at least a dozen times, I started getting very interested in dreams, which led to information on lucid dreaming. And I thought, okay, this is what's happening. I'm having lucid dreams. But I'm still convinced it was her. And finally found Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, and picked it up. I'm like, wow, you can go out of the body, huh? This sounds a little scary. His book was very sincere and gave exercises on how to do it. So I thought, okay, I'll try this. I'm not sure I believe it. Sounds a little freaky, but definitely worth trying. And I did these exercises, which are basically just meditation, relaxation, visualization exercises. And to my shock, they worked. They worked really well. It didn't take me long, a month or two of doing them. When I had my first out-of-body experience, laid down one day on my stomach in bed. I was just feeling a little bit down and started feeling these heavy-duty vibrations, which Robert Monroe had talked about. He said, oh, you'll feel sort of mild electrical sensations. I thought, mild? I thought I was being electrocuted. I seriously thought I had stuck my finger into the electrical socket next to my bed and was being electrocuted. And this energy just became so intense, I popped out of my body, could feel it. I whooshed across my bedroom, through the hallway and into the bathroom, grabbed the counter, looked up at the mirror. No one was there. And I thought to myself, well, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I was super excited, and it pulled me right back into my bedroom. I saw a man standing there, a short gentleman standing next to my bed. and I grabbed him by the shoulders and whirled him around and looked up into his face, and it completely blurred, so I couldn't see who it was. And I assumed a horizontal position over my body and plopped back in. Woke up immediately, and boy, did I feel good. I was amazed. I knew right then that there is life after death, that the out-of-body experience is real. And I was bound and determined to do this again. And I did. I would started having them very regularly after that. Next one was very similar. The third one was very scary. I woke up in the middle of the night standing next to my bed, and finally oriented myself. I had a little bit of vertigo. I was quite confused, and finally fully woke up and looked down on my bed and saw myself lying there under the covers. And I got this feeling of cold dread, utter terror, and realized I had died. That's what I thought. I'm dead. What have I done? I am now dead. So I dived back into my body immediately. Felt this weird sensation of filling up my physical body like water pouring into sort of a mold, and woke up. Nearly forgot. I laid there for a second, wondering what the heck just happened, and remembered and became very happy. And it just snowballed from there. I really doubled down on these exercises and meditations and started having first 3-second out-of-body experiences where I'd pop out, become overjoyed, and get pulled right back in. Had to learn how to control my emotions. And finally did that, learned how to move, how to see, all these things you have to do by kind of trial and error. Finally got up the courage to leave my room.
Can I ask a question real quick, Preston? You said, you've mentioned a couple times you had to learn this, you had to teach yourself, or it was a process during it. What kind of time span are we looking at? I mean, so many people think, oh, I'm going to try something for a week and don't get any results and they give up. Like, how much work did you put into this?
I was put in a lot of work. This is very much like learning to play a musical instrument, learning a new language. You really have to put the effort forth. And it started immediately. I mean, within 2 weeks of doing the exercises, I was having great, really strong dream recall, very intense pre-lucid dreams. And within 2 months, I'd say I had my first OBE. But it took me a full year to move these OBEs beyond 3 seconds, 5 seconds to a minute. A full year, seriously. I'd wake up in my room just flapping my arms, trying to move, and I couldn't do it. And my vision kept going in and out. And I really had to focus, and meditate and center myself and breathe deep and try to just really get through it. But I did it. And after a year, I was able to extend it to more than a minute. And after 2 years, I would say up to 5 minutes. Started going outside the house, exploring the neighborhood. And after 3 years, I was starting to get really good at it. This would happen 4 or 5 times a month, usually on weekends when I could sleep late. And
Can I ask a question? I want to go to Ron, but just to get everybody to get their initial impressions in. But do you think there's a connection to UFOs with OBEs?
I do. Like I said, I don't think it's a coincidence that these things happened at the same time for me. And having talked to a lot of people who are having UFO experiences, many of them have astral travel experiences.
Yeah. Many
of them are taken on board UFO astrally and physically, or will even have an out-of-body experience while on board the UFO. You can go out of body and visit ETs, UFOs. I've done that. So there is absolutely a connection. The ETs are trying to wake us up to the ability of astral travel. I think that's kind of what happened with me. Beautiful. And probably most experiencers. So yeah, it just snowballed from there.
Beautiful. Now you had a contact with your mother. Let's go to Ron Johnson. You had probably the most dramatic story I've heard of talking to your mother, where LB, the being that you're dealing with, actually takes you to visit your mother. So talk about how it started with you with the the fear again that where you suddenly found yourself out of your body? And what do you think the connection to UFOs and OBEs is?
Okay, with me, my first OBE encounter was back in 1975. It was very scary. I thought I had died and gone to hell, to be honest with you. And then it kind of quit after that. And the connection didn't come until later, until I started having my encounters with Obe in 2008. And they, I believe personally that it's a, oh gosh, how do I say that? It's a, an extension of your consciousness into what a human, into what you're capable of doing. Because it's not just OBEs, it's other things, telekinesis, and the list goes on and on and on. But another thing with the OBEs and my encounters, especially with Obe, is there's a it's like a time paradox. There's how do I say this? There's a it's almost like time don't exist. It's what seems like while you're having these OBEs, you don't know if it's lasting for hours or 10 minutes or what. And it's hard to grasp. The only way I can describe it is you need to practice, you need to do it and experience it for yourself. But when I started having these encounters with Obe, that's when my OBEs really started to expand. And at first, just like what Preston was saying, at first, it's very, very hard to get used to them. With me, it was real simple because I'd be out working in the yard and I'd get so tired, not only physically tired, but mentally tired. And I would usually come in, flop down on the couch or onto my bed and just fix my eyes on something, a picture on the wall or whatever. And then after a while, when they first started doing this, I would become totally paralyzed. I wouldn't be able to move. And then as time went on, the paralysis wouldn't happen. I would leave my body and actually feel myself rising upward. And I could see myself from above. And that's how it started for me. And I do believe there's a strong connection. They may be one of the same thing because the feeling is the same. It's a real surreal type feeling.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question about that? Because you're talking about the experience, right? The feeling of having these experiences and how it's the sensation of these experiences that make you feel like they are connected somehow, right? It's the feeling of the experience. That's what you're talking about. So I want to ask you about that a little bit because that's often said, that's often something you hear in this community, regardless of whatever the specific experiences that someone is talking about. People often say, I just knew, I just had this feeling of knowing, I had this feeling of total conviction that my experience was actually happening. They just had this feeling, right? That's what's said over and over again by people during these experiences, even if they don't have proof. So I want to ask you, when you've had this feeling, is it the feeling of how often has it been like having a dream versus having an experience that you are aware during the time you're having it, like the time you're inside the experience, you're awake and aware and you know it's not a dream? How has it been a mixture of both? Do you feel like it feels like a dream half the time and the other half the time you know what's going on? Like how much of it is a dreamlike state to you and how much of it is a state of awareness during the actual experiences?
Well, having the actual experience to me feels more real, except for it's not with, you know, me physically. It's more consciousness. And as for proof, I came in one day from working real hard out in the yard and flopped down on the couch as I usually do. And I left my, as before, I could feel myself rising out of my body. And when I was up above looking down at me, I was thinking of my sister. She had just moved into a new apartment in Seattle, Washington. And I had never saw her apartment before. And I was thinking, you know, this would be kind of neat to go see that and see what it looks like. And so it was like the speed of thought. I was in this strange room. It looked like an apartment. It had a kitchen counter, a living room. There was a couch in there, and there was all kinds of boxes and plastic totes stacked up. And so I started kind of floating around, looking at different things. And I went into the bedroom, and my sister was asleep in her bed. And I really had a bad feeling that I shouldn't have been there. I was intruding. So I said, I need to go back to my body, and everything turns a fuzzy white, and I can feel a sensation of moving. And then I find myself back above my body, which is laying on the couch, and I enter back into it. Now, the things I saw, I called my sister the next day and was talking to her, and I described what I saw lying on the kitchen counter. I described her coat I bought for her a couple of Christmases prior to that, laying on top of boxes. I described what was in the living room, the bathroom, her bedroom, and she says you hit it spot on, pretty much 100%. So yeah, I do believe there's more than a connection. I believe that it's actually a part of your conscious growing, and these entities are teaching this to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to hand it back to Nicole really quickly. Nicole, do you want to ask Ron anything before I move on to the next person? I think you had a question for him.
It keeps, my questions keep getting answered. That's like the wonderful thing. But I do want to point out that we are seeing a few similarities in the stories that people have shared so far. You know, there is this feeling of, or that shared feeling between UFOs and this out of body experience. So I guess a question I would like to throw into the mix for everybody who gives their testimony is, when did you first make this connection that there were these similarities? Like, what made that click for you? Was it experiencing the UFO first and then the out of body experience, or was it kind of like an aha moment of talking to other people who had experienced the same thing? So just to kind of keep it in mind. But I think we're going to pass it on to Gerard Pratt, and he's coming to us today from Liverpool, UK. And I think he's going to share some of his experiences and his thoughts.
Hi. I've just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, that's a good start, isn't it? Yeah. Well, for me, it's been, I mean, a bit like Preston, but I was, we've had this conversation before. As a child, I had some visions and I seen a craft. And then, you know, when I was 18, I was in the army, and that's when I had my first OBEs. And I was flapping around like a bird, didn't know what to do. And then it went on for some years, but moved on some years later. I was took from my bed by an angelic being. And that was an OBE stick. So he took me down the stairs by my hand. And that was quite shocking. But when I touched him, I felt a oneness with the universe. So fast forwarding from that, it really starts for me about 10 years ago. Now, I was having experiences, a wide variety of waking up and seeing documents and numbers and football scores. And I was waking up out of body. So there was no vibrations or anything like that. I was waking up. So it was a sleep-induced. So I was waking up in strange places, doing strange things, flying around. But I started waking up in an apartment. I don't know whose place it was, but I was learning to move, learning to spin, put my hand through walls. So it was like a training package I went through. And that happened about 3 times. I don't know whose apartment it was. I was looking through the wardrobes. I could see the telly on down the corridor, the TV. And I was just learning how to move. And after that, I started progressing, tripped across the Atlantic to the pyramids, to Greek temples. It really was a fantastic thing. And then I started visiting deceased relatives, my grandparents, and I went to visit them. But the point I wanted to make, for me, a lot of the experiences were like shamanic. It was guided. So I wouldn't decide where I was going to be. For example, I'd find myself at the end of my grandparents' road, and I would know exactly where they were, and I'd make my entrance, have tea with them, drinks, and then I'd go back to the window I came through. So this went on for quite some time, these wow experiences, until I sat down and I read William Buhlman's book on out-of-body experiences. So when I read William's books and Robert Monroe's, I started learning. I wanted a wake-induced experience. So I wanted to lay on the bed and have an experience without losing any, without going to sleep. So a wake-induced experience. And it took me I'd say a lot quicker than it would have been Preston. It probably took me about a couple of months. It took a while. And then one morning after work, I came in and I was adamant it was going to happen. And I laid there for about 6 hours. And eventually, the vibrations came over the body, and I went out of body through the roof, seeing the timber through the ceiling, into the street. And that was the first wake-induced experience. So I had a few more wake-induced. And it was a wow. That was the moment I knew we were eternal beings, that there was life after death. There was nothing to fear. But quickly, I had so many experiences following that. And for me, out-of-body experiences, when you have them, other things follow. And since then, I've had downloads, I've had Akashic pages coming up with information, clear audience, regular voices, screen communication with letters in the middle of the night, moving them around, loads of shamanic journeys, music. I've had music, which is the trigger. I mean, just last night, I didn't even know what angel writing was. And I've had numbers coming up, which correspond to angel writing. So it's just new things all the time. So for me, where do UFOs come into this? It gets quite complicated for me because as well as spirit interactions, I've had a case where I had to stop doing this because the house became infested with energy beings and spirits. And I got so much where the wife wasn't very happy about the amount of spirits that she was seeing, the kids were seeing, and my son got locked in the bathroom. Visitors to the home were seeing spirits. So I had to stop doing it for a while. But there was the UFO situation happened. There was a being that has interacted with me probably from last 5 years. And this being usually, he's always wore a hood till recently. And when I had my UFO encounter where I was taken on board a craft, at the end of the experience, this being was stood in the corner. And I'm trying to work out, was he with them or was he not with them? So he's got a lot to do with this. And when I seen his face for the first time, he revealed himself to me. he looks, I'd say, like a hybrid. He's got a certain look of an ET being. I'll show you a picture of him actually, and that's what he looks like. But he's got blue eyes. So for me, it's transition now. So we've got UFOs, we've got a being that looks like an ET, which I thought was a higher being. And he's took me on journeys as well. I mean, I'll give you one example. I was floating out of body above the UK. I was above Manchester and Liverpool, looking down at the cities. And I was thinking, where am I going to go? What shall I do tonight? Who shall I visit? And before I could think too much, I seen him come flying towards me. He merged with my body quickly. He then starts diving towards the earth. So I'm now thinking, well, I thought I'm going to be okay because I know I'm eternal. We'll hit the earth. I'll survive. We're going faster now. We're getting towards the earth, and a portal opened up, and we slip into this like colourful portal, and there's all colours around now, and I'm quite comfortable now. And we stop, and there's people waiting to greet me, and they're shaking my hand, saying, "How are you, Gerard? Are you okay?" And they let me show you around, and they start showing me around complexes of caverns, buildings under the ground, and things. And this being's been present quite a lot. And I had an experience where he let me view through his own eyes, and he showed me my death. He showed me the transition. So I've always thought, is he a higher self being? But now that he's pulled his hood back recently and showed me his face, I'm thinking, is he an ET being? So I'm a bit confused. I'm still learning. There's a lot to learn. You know, I've been chatting to Preston Dennett. I mean, I'm quite funnily, I was giving him advice until he told me he had a book on the subject. And I thought, how stupid am I? You know, the guy's got books on the subject. So now he's my mentor. So suddenly switched quite quickly. But yeah, I'm having new experiences. The music was a wow thing I had recently, where music was being played. And I thought, what is this music? And then a few weeks later, in the middle of a dream, the music starts playing. Then I realized it's a trigger for lucidity. And the music played again in this dream, and someone comes in, there's a telephone call for you. I answer the phone, there's some guy on the phone. I said, who are you? He said, I'm Dave. I said, where are you from? He said, I'm from a higher dimension than you. I said, well, where is it? I said, can I come and have a look at it? He said, yeah. He says, it's good here, you'll like it. So when can I come and visit? He said, Gerard, he said, there's a place for you here. Don't you worry about that. And I put the phone down. And I sat up in bed thinking, so we've got spirit things going on. We've got UFO things going on. So OBEs, it opens a doorway wide open. And I think they can interact with you more. It's very right brain, as we talk about. And I think it's just easy for them to interact with you. When you're in an OBE state, you're wide open for them. I've had negative experiences. I've been strangled. I've been punched. But I've left myself wide open. And as I said, we've had an infestation in the home, but we've got through that now. And onwards and upwards. So, new things happen. I don't know what they'll come up with next. They show me different things. But not to complicate things even more, there's another 3 beings involved here who have told me that they're light beings, and they're my real guides. But we can talk about that later. I'll give somebody else a chance to talk.
Okay.
Thanks, Gerard. I actually just want to remark on your experience from a personal perspective, because you and I have been communicating for about a year, maybe over a year now. You've been very generous sharing your experiences and your journals with me.
Yeah, I've got nothing to hide.
One of the things that makes it fascinating is that your experience is expanding to include other people in your life, like people who have come to your home, have experienced funny things, your family members are experiencing more and more things. So it's interesting that many of the people, yourself included, in this community have that experience of being a kind of antenna or a magnet for this to happen. Maybe it's a contract, an agreement we made in a previous lifetime to have this happen. There are lots of theories about why these things occur, but that it does seem to radiate outwards to other people in our lives sometimes. Definitely. So I'm going to bring this over to Wendy. Wendy's a fellow Ontarian Canadian. Karen, who's up next, is also a Canadian. Karen's in Winnipeg. Wendy is here in Toronto alongside me. Wendy, I don't know if you've had the experience of your own, journey of high strangeness and the paranormal sort of energetically expanding to include other people in your life, but certainly your own understanding of it has expanded, and you've started doing some really interesting work on your own with regard to psychic sight. So we wanted to ask you about that, about your own personal experience, and also the work that you're doing with psychic sight, which is in some ways very connected to the OBE experience, right? The ability to send the mind outside of the body. The consciousness is not glued to the physical. It's able to travel and perceive from outside of our physical form. So please do speak to your own experience and the work you're doing. It is really, really exciting and fascinating. You're muted, Wendy. You just need to unmute yourself.
Okay,
there we go.
I'm unmuted. I'm having difficulty with my internet connection, so if I leave you unexpectedly. My experiences started way back in 2017, was due to a death in my family. And I didn't know anything about this, and all of a sudden this person kept visiting me and actually kept warning me different ways. In fact, I was sitting in my living room one time and this person was trying to warn me and actually moved the sleeve of my house coat back and forth. So if anybody, to me, there's definitely an after life after death for sure, because I've received messages from a lot of my family. I've also been, my ET visitation started around that time too, and I've had them come visit me in my bedroom where they're all standing around my bed. I'm trying to figure out why, but they were standing waving their arms, and people have told me that they were trying to heal me, obviously from the death of this person in my life. But this went on for quite a few years. And my experiences just got more and more and more, and I was getting more visitations all the time. But I did expand, and I got very interested in seeing with the blindfold on, which is a whole another thing about psychic abilities. And I've been training for around 3 years on that. And while I'm doing that, I'm finding that I can take my mind not only to different places, but I can see what people are holding and at different houses and stuff. It's really kind of a wild thing. And I can read with the blindfold on, or move around with the blindfold on, can see the whole room with the blindfold on. So this whole thing has just kind of blown my mind. And this all happened in like 3.5 years. And my mom had passed away recently. And when she passed away, I received messages from her. So to me, I think it's all connected. My out-of-body experiences have come with just sitting there meditating, getting ready to do my practice with the blindfold. And this is when I went into my friend's house in another country and described what her apartment looked like. Right after that, I was in this ET ship, standing there looking out at the earth with the panel of the spaceship in front of me. And it just, all these experiences just keep building up and building up. I've had them visited me, and I don't understand this part where this tall, shrouded person visited me and just touched me in the forehead, and I was pumped full of energy for like a month. I could hardly walk, I could hardly stand, my knees were shaking. It's just been a constant journey for me, that it's been kind of incredible, because I now know everything is connected. I now know that there is life after death. I now know that you can send your consciousness anywhere that you want to. It's pretty incredible, yeah.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm going to turn it back to Nicole. Nicole, take it away.
That was wonderful. I'm smiling every time I hear it's all connected. Like, it seems to connect us all. It's all connected. I think our last one to kind of introduce themselves and tell their thoughts and ideas is our friend Karen, and she's an experiencer from Winnipeg, I believe. And she's been in and out a few of the rabbit holes, I believe, if I'm thinking of the right Karen. But Karen, you're with us with audio today. Can you?
Right. Well, thank you for inviting me here today. I have to say that so much of what everyone has said here really resonates with me, and I'm just sort of blown away by this. But I truly believe that my paranormal experiences, including OBEs, telepathy, lucid dreaming, clairaudience, really started after a major contact experience I was about 14 years old, so it'd be early 70s. That same year, I had a waking OBE, which I have had not a lot, but a few since, and lots in the sleeping state. And at this particular time, I was a teenager. I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I was in an emotional state. And I was lying down on the bed with my face on the bed. And I just told myself I didn't want to think of anything. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried that. Maybe you do that when you do meditation, but I have never tried it myself. But it's a very difficult thing to do, to really clear your mind of any thoughts. And as I was lying there doing that, a humming noise became very prevalent, a really loud humming noise. And then everything just kind of went white. And I felt my body being lifted right up to the ceiling. And I looked down and I could see myself. And I thought, oh, wow, I can see myself. This is really cool, And then I said to myself, it was sort of a realization, like the body is just a shell and the real me is up here. And it was an overriding feeling of peace. And what I thought I wanted to say and share is that I knew at that moment the answer to any question I had ever had. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but I just knew everything that there was to know. And I think that I then looked down at myself and I asked myself, oh God, am I dead? And when that fear entered me, I literally dropped back into my body. And I had other experiences like that in a waking state. Say I was driving through the mountains and I could feel my body being lifted and I could see the car driving through the mountains. But it's not something I really practiced. I would have to say that after the major contact spirits I had, I was just sort of hooked on. I knew that like the others have said, that there is so much more to reality and that there is a life after life. And I wasn't afraid of death anymore. It really made a difference to me. I have had contact experiences throughout my life, but it kind of stopped from the period of when I was 30 to 40. And I would say most recently it has started again. And I had an experience where I was talking to a friend who is very religious. And she felt that if there was intelligence outside of our own world, God would have said so in the Bible. And I said to her, well, I think it is in the Bible. And I sort of pointed out different parts of the Bible, like Ezekiel's wheel, so on and so on and so on. And just trying to open her mind to it. And the next morning, I woke up with the triangle marks on my wrist. I don't know if maybe some of you were aware of that or not, but that's what I would say would be my most recent experience. But I have a lot of like downloads and lucid dreaming. I have contacted you know, my husband who passed away about 2 years ago, my sister more recently. I really believe that it is connected to the UFO experiences.
Beautiful. Let me just jump in here for a second. We just have a book. Karen helped us actually edit the book on triangles. And people, if you've seen the comments that were on Facebook, people are saying, let's see some evidence. We're going to show the photographs of the two triangles that Karen had on her wrist, one on one wrist, one on the other.
Actually, no, they were on the same wrist.
They're on the same wrist,
Yeah,
but they were
yeah.
completely different types of triangles.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's just stunning when you see that appear on the body. So yeah, there is this definite connection, and they are sort of giving us little pieces of evidence. And you're older, so they can't really say that, you know, we're making hybrid babies or anything. It seems to be more of a spiritual type thing where they've gone beyond that and being taken when you're there. I wanted out one other person here. We said this is the end, and then we'll sort of open it up for questions, because I have a question particularly about a number of the people here have flown the ship. I'd like to hear a little bit about that, and the 360-degree vision that people report in out-of-body experiences, which people on board the ship will describe the same sort of thing. But I wanted to out Desta, because Desta was hinting before we started the show that she had some out-of-body experiences. So let's get Desta on here to put in her 2 cents worth.
Desta.
Oh my God, hold on. I'm not prepared for this. I don't have the ones like everyone else does. So that mine aren't connected to seeing anything. Mine are just, I had spontaneous ones when I was a kid. Yeah, they're not connected, I don't think, to anything. I know it's all connected, but I mean, it's, I had a couple in traumatic. I know a lot of people know or look into the fact that a lot of them are based on traumatic events if you have a spontaneous one. So I had a couple traumatic events, I guess you could say, when I was like 13 and 14 years old, and just like popped randomly during the day, popped out of my body. And yeah, so I don't think it's connected to any of this stuff, but I have experienced it. And I had the 360 vision because I was out. Like one time I was out on the ceiling and looking back at myself, you know, and I could see everything and could see my body and could recognize myself, and definitely knew, like, you know, that's Desta down there kind of thing, you know, like I was not, I felt no connection to my body, but I definitely knew that that was the person who's Desta, who has an association to me, but I wasn't like super emotionally connected to her. I just was like, I actually was maybe even connected in a not good way, in kind of a way where I just thought like, oh, that's like the human terrible thing over there, that I'm not super happy about it. And when I popped back into my body, I definitely felt like, oh my God, the most heavy, sluggish, you know, as compared to what I was feeling when I was on the ceiling, like looking at myself kind of thing, when it is 360 degrees and you just are like so open and a vast amount of consciousness kind of thing, and connected to everything. And then when it's just like the 3D body of the Desta kind of thing was just like, I was not interested. And when I popped back into my body, I started bawling. And I was 13 years old. I knew what an out of body experience was, but I don't know that I thought at that moment that that's exactly what happened. I just knew that, you know, I could recognize what happened, and it was so overwhelming because I was so young. I just started bawling, thinking like, oh my God, this is the most horrible feeling ever, being trapped in this like meat suit kind of thing. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't have expressed it like that in those days, but of course.
Berg.
He's gonna
Berg.
I'm gonna go now.
So anyways, but it was Berg. It was not, I don't think it was connected to this kind of stuff. I just happened to have had it, and yeah. So
let me jump in real quick, because I feel like I'm probably the noobest of the newbies here today. And I guess how I've pieced this together in my anthology is I now believe I had an out-of-body experience that followed a head injury when I was 3 years old. And so I think I had this ability to pop out. And so by the time I had my near-death out-of-body experience during a surgery when I was 25, I had already had this out-of-body experience lingering. I mean, it didn't scare me. It felt so familiar. And since I was able to remember it in its entirety, it struck this chord with me that it felt like the pause I experienced with my UFO sighting and my missing time. And all of these revelations kind of came as soon as I quit only chasing nuts and bolts, like trying to figure out that side of ufology. And that's how I came across Preston's book. And Desta, shortly after I even read Preston's book, I heard you give like maybe one of your first interviews ever. And you talked about certain meditation practices that you use. And you described this feeling of coming out of your body or maybe a vibration. So, I mean, I got these little snidbits of things that I could try myself. And it's been so inspirational over the last 2 years, especially for me. So where was I going with this? Oh, the feeling of oneness. And Grant, you wanted us to kind of have everybody throw their 2 cents in on what was your last thing? And then,
well, the question I had wanted to raise was this 360-degree vision, because what you see with the UFO thing is they're talking about, if you see what your friend Jim Peniston, when he had the conversation with Kit Green, he says to Kit Green, so what's going on here? Like, what are you doing? What are you bugging me for? What do you want my DNA for? And then Kit Green says, well, this is kind of like propulsion. He said, come on, propulsion. What do you mean? You think I'm stupid? I mean, this is not going to do with propulsion. You're talking to these experiences. He said, we're trying to figure out how do they pop in and pop out just as quickly. So the question I had, because I know Ron Johnson had flown the craft, and he ends up on the other side of the Milky Way looking back within 1 second. And
hang on, let Ron tell that story. But
yeah, and then Gerald. But I wanted to see if anybody else has flown the craft, because if you remember back to the experience with Ben Rich at Lockheed Skunk Works director, when he's giving this speech at UCLA, and then Jan Harson has had this experience at 9 years old with the UFO, and he goes to Ben. He said, Ben, I need to know, how do they get here? How does the propulsion system work? And he turns around and says, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And then Jan Harson says, oh, it means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben Rich said, that's how it works. And turns around, walks away, and gets his car and drives away. So that's this whole, why I'm so interested in this out-of-body experience UFO thing, is this actually as physical as we think it is? Do you actually are popping out, or is it all one thing where they're not really coming from anywhere? Almost like the Politico magazine, but this Brian Bender from Politico says that the US government did a study on interdimensionality, on the idea that they are actually from here, just a different here, and this whole thing. And that's what Kit Green was doing, this thing. How do they pop in and pop out? So that was where I'm looking at this 360-degree vision that people describe, this thing where they're flying the craft and they're this kind of stuff, where it starts to look like it's not as physical as we think it is. So maybe we can jump off on that and see who's flown the craft here. I think 14% in the survey, 14% of people have flown the craft.
I'll start off here and say that as my learning how to fly the craft evolved and I was locked into it, hands down, it became like you go wherever you think. And I could see behind me, and you would go at the speed of thought. And I was always like, let's go to the beach. Let's go to vacation spots. Let's do that. But then I've never mastered this going out of body on purpose experience. But I can say with my out of body experience, that whole above the body perception was everywhere as well. And when I thought about it, that's when I could move it beyond like seeing myself on the table I moved it beyond, and that's where I could see my mother having a conversation. So it did have this like evolving kind of everywhere perception. And I felt like there were other things there with me. I knew I wasn't alone when I call it the in-between now. So
Okay. So let's go to Ron.
so
Let-
you could take it
Desta
over.
actually wanted to say something. She had her
Yeah.
hand up when Nicole put hers up. Maybe Desta
So
can speak
Grant
quickly
asked
before we
how
go
many
on.
people have flown the craft. And so I think we raised our hands for that.
Yeah. No, I maybe wanted to go to Ron to describe, and Ron is actually, he's the inspiration for today's show. Ron is actually on his Facebook site done a 7-part series on his OBE UFO experiences where he sort of spells this all out. But he was one of the people, and I think I've got 50 people who have flown the craft, and everybody says the same thing. You do it with your mind, and that makes it look like the mind is much more important. And that's why it ties into this UFO, this OBE thing. Is we start to wonder, is this happening in a matrix state, or is this happening in the physical state, or what's really going on? So Ron, tell the story quickly, just a short version of the story of you actually flying the craft when they allow you to fly it.
Okay, this was my very last encounter, physical encounter I had with Elby. And it started out the same as before. I saw the beam of light, everything turns kind of a hazy white, and then I wake up on this craft, and LB comes over, and I'm up in a cubicle up on the ceiling, and he brings me down, and he tells me that it's time that you find out why this is happening to you. And so he tells me that I have been programmed from birth to fly this ship that we were on. Not one like it, but this one. And so he has me go over and sit down on this big plastic looking chair, and there's a console in front of it. And these symbols that I've been forced to watch all these years start appearing on this console. And then I asked Elby, I said, well, what am I supposed to do now? And he says, it's all inside you. All you have to do is whatever you think, the ship will respond.
Wow.
And so he says, what would you like to do? And I told him, I said, I'd like to go out into deep space and see the Milky Way galaxy from afar. And so he tells me, he says, that's what we'll do, but I want to warn you before we go, as close as we are to Earth, you're gonna, when we accelerate, you're gonna feel G-force, and it's gonna be unbearable. And he said, as soon as we start hopping the dimensions, then the G-force will go away. And so I sit down in the seat of this, and I thinking to myself, you know, I want to go out and see the Milky Way from afar. And so all of a sudden the ship starts moving, and the G-force is unbearable. It's like a roller coaster ride from hell. And I about pass out. I can't stand it. And then, just like you take a book and you thumb through the pages of a picture book real fast, that's what it looked like outside, you know, because when I sat down on the ship, it's like the whole front of the ship disappeared and I could see out into space. And he tells me that the only way you can get from point A to point B, he said the distances are so vast. He says you have to transverse the dimensions, and that's what we did. And he said, I said that, you know, the distances are so vast that that's the only way you can get there. And so we, just like within a split second, we're setting out in space, and I can see the Milky Way galaxy back. And it was just awesome. And we did the same thing and went back to where we started from. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you. I've got a question that is kind of for everyone, but I'm going to direct it towards Preston first, if that's all right. I'm kind of jumping off what Desta said earlier. She was referencing trauma as a trigger. And, you know, I'll use the phrase, trauma can be a crack where the light comes in, right? Trauma kind of jars us and kind of shakes us out of what feels normal, stable, and comfortable. And that can be an opportunity for other things to occur. So with the reference of trauma, I'm going to kind of bring in the topic of abduction. And my question is related to the opinion of a few really highly regarded people in our field, Jacques Vallée, you know, Edgar Mitchell, Kit Green, and the Wilson document, the leaked Wilson document also references that there may not be any abduction happening, that there is an event occurring, but it might not be abduction specifically, or it might not be an actual physical removal of the person from their bed, wherever they are at the time. It could be something else that's occurring, and it could be an activity that's happening within consciousness, purely within consciousness. So because abduction is very often seen as being a traumatic event and is experienced often as being a traumatic event, this is an interesting perspective, you know, that the way in which it's experienced may not actually reflect the reality of what is going on. Of course, that's a very complicated thing to bring up. So Preston, I wanted to put this to you first because you've had personal experience, varied personal experience, but you've also collected so many stories and you've been documenting them and sharing them and have compiled many of them into books. So I just want to start with you. What do you think about that? About, you know, what Jacques Vallée, who of course is very highly respected in our field, Edgar Mitchell, Kit Green, you know, the Wilson document, other people saying that abduction may not be what we think it is. It may be some other kind of event within consciousness, but not actually a physical thing. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, interesting. Jacques Vallée started out as a real nuts and bolts kind of researcher and has really branched off into the paranormal aspects of this because it is definitely connected. I'm absolutely 100% convinced that people are being physically taken on board UFOs. This does happen. They are not in their bedrooms. They're not where they're supposed to be. But that said, yes, people are also taken in an astral state. And you're right, this is complicated because all of this stuff does happen. Trauma is a part of this, for sure. That's how it started with me, my mom passing away. And when someone has an initial UFO experience, that can be very traumatic. And sometimes the ETs will do this in a way just to wake people up out of the denial that they have wrapped themselves into so heavily that they need a little shake up. So we see, of course, that's what a near-death experience is. It's very severe trauma that pulls a person right out of their body. So I think there is a connection. I am of the belief that these are separate phenomena that have very strong correlations and very strong bleed-throughs. But I also want to just backtrack a little bit to what Wendy said and seeing, you know, through blindfolds and, you know, vision, because I found that really interesting. Because I had an experience where I was lying in bed meditating and I thought, well, I can see my whole room, but I'm sure my eyes are closed. And I thought for a while, because this kept happening, that I must have very thin eyelids and I can see through my eyelids until I realized, no, what's happening here? Because vision is very peculiar in the out-of-body state. I had a lot of trouble seeing initially, but once you learn, you see an absolute pristine clearness. And yes, you can see three-dimensionally. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about what astral projection is, because we think of ourselves as leaving our body, but really that's a misnomer. The fact is we are projecting down to a physical body. And I loved it when Desta talked about, you know, her experience with putting herself in air quotes, the Desta in air quotes, because that is kind of the way this experience is. When you have an out-of-body experience, you're going home. You're going to the real world. You are not projecting, you are returning. So really, we're physically projecting all day long. And an astral projection is a return. And I have, wrapping it back to the whole UFO connection, I did have an experience once where I popped out of body and found myself in a craft with a lady who had written a book about near-death experiences. Hasha Hanti, I think was her name. And I'm like, it was a very brief experience, but it was like, wow, what are you doing here? And where are we? Oh, this is inside a UFO. And did pop out of my body once and saw a gray. That was pretty exciting. So all this stuff is definitely wrapped up together, but I don't know. I'm not convinced that this is, reality itself is kind of a matrix. It's very much perception, and thought rules on the astral plane. What you think will happen. You think a place, you go there. So it's all very much about consciousness.
Can
Can
I?
Thank you. I'm just going to jump over to Desta because I think she wanted to say something. Desta, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to bring up, and I always want to bring this up because I've had so many of them my whole life, but like the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states of consciousness, because that also I think is so directly tied to this, but also because it's kind of like what everyone's saying with the 360, the super vision, the super clear seeing, and because I just happened to have one last night, I think that it's super connected because you can be 100% awake, you're 100% sure you're awake, you're sitting up in bed, you're looking around, and you're seeing something that is not what is not in this reality kind of thing, right? So whether it's like a being, and I always wonder that about other people getting abducted or experiences that they're seeing, is because I see so many of these, but because I'm sure that I'm having these, because I've had so many of these hypnagogic experiences, I'm sure that when I wake up kind of thing, like the next day, not when I'm doing it, because I am awake, I'm sure I'm awake, I'm sitting up in bed, and I'm so sure that it's real what's happening. But I do also know from being in bed with someone else and saying, oh my God, there's people in the yard, because I saw 3 grays in the yard one time, and I was like, oh my God, there's people in the yard. And my partner got up and ran to the door and was going crazy thinking there was people in the yard. And then as I was slowly waking up and he was like, where are they outside, I was thinking, oh shit, this is like, I said, oh, I think that I was just, and he was so mad because he's like, oh, you're just having one of your things again. But I was so 100% sure. I woke up, I was sitting at the edge of my bed, looking out my window. There was 3 beings in the yard that were all pointing in the same direction. And I was awake. I was awake and talking to my partner, woke him up kind of thing, and made him go outside. So I was so sure I was seeing it. And in that state, you're always so sure you're seeing it. So I've always wondered if the people getting pulled out of their body, the abduction state, whatever, is that they maybe aren't so, they haven't had like hundreds or thousands of these hypnagogic or pompic experiences. So maybe that's what they're experiencing, which is still a true state. And you're just seeing into, I don't know why, like, you're seeing into some other reality, or you have more sight or whatever, or I don't know what the explanation really is. But I think but same with out of body, because I feel the same when I'm doing the hypnagogic thing, that I feel the same as when I was out of body. It feels the same, like, Grant and everyone is saying, like, you have a 360, you're so sure you're awake, you're so sure it's true, you're so sure the clarity of what you're seeing is reality, that when it wears off and when you actually, come to, or however you want to say it, you're like, oh, it's so weird that, because I was so sure that was real. I was so sure I was seeing this. And you're thinking, you're sitting up, you're sometimes talking to another person, you're so awake and aware. But of course, the scientific explanation or whatever is just that you're still dreaming, but it never feels like I'm so sure. It's happened to me hundreds, if not thousands of times. I know that I'm not dreaming. I know what a dream is. It's such a different experience that it makes me wonder if that's connected to the out of body experience as well as the abduction experience, or something that's happening in the middle of the night, because you're just in this, theta state kind of thing, playing with different realities and in possibly 2 different states of awareness. you know, or in the trance-like state at least, which is allowing you to be able to perceive a different, whatever, dimension or reality or however you want to say it. I just want to throw that in there.
Good, beautiful. Just let me throw another bone in this thing here. If you recall, the question I would, for people, because everybody wants to jump in now and talk about stuff, but the one thing I'd like people to maybe answer for me, because this is my big curiosity, is this idea, where are we actually, when you're having the out-of-body experience or the abduction experience or whatever, where are we? I mean, do the aliens and the dead people, because you'll hear all these people talking about they met dead people on board the ship and stuff. Dreams, Bashar saying the famous statement, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. So where are we actually? And when it comes to this abduction thing, I'll give you the example. I always talk about Akiana Kramark when I wrote the Inspired book. Akiana Kramark is this double savant prodigy who does this art. She did the picture of Jesus at 8 years old that's worth like $5 million or whatever. She talks about 5 years old when she gets taken. She disappears from her house. She is gone. They have police looking for her. They have pictures out. The whole house is surrounded, all this kind of stuff. I think she was, I can't remember, outside of Chicago when this happened. And she said Jesus took her, Jesus and God. She was following this orb through the universe, and she had a thousand eyes. She could see all different things, and they'd shown her the universe, and she used to paint all these things. And now she does this amazing painting, which is like she's one of the best painters in the world, but she was definitely gone for 5 hours, but Jesus grabbed her. So where are we in terms of when you're answering these, people speak to this thing? Where do you think this is happening? Is this happening in a matrix? Is this happening? Is there a physical world consciousness? It just seems so strange to me when you start looking at how many dead people are showing up, because I think most of the people here today, when they've had their out-of-body experience, have talked to dead people. So there seems to be this connection, and they've had contacts with aliens. Is this all happening in the same world, or what do you think is going on there?
Well, I'll speak to that real quick. I think when you go out of body, it becomes really clear that the physical world is built by consciousness. And what we think of as space and distance is absolutely an illusion. And if you think about the concept of infinity, how big is the universe? It's as big as a dot, really. I mean, space is absolutely an illusion, because when you're out of body and you want to go to, say, a distant location, which I've done, like to the moon or Area 51, you're traveling out there, like going 5 miles an hour. I'm like, shoot, this is going to take me hours to get there. And then boom, you're there, you teleport. And so really you're kind of moving the universe through you. I can't speak to being, abducted by Jesus and not being there. That's fascinating to me because that shows how strongly connected these phenomena are, and that the physical world can be manipulated, because people can manifest things. There are apports, this sort of thing. There are weird bleed throughs when people have out-of-body experiences, and weird stuff comes back into the physical world. So I think, yeah, my point would be space is an illusion, time is an illusion, and we're all really, it's all together. When you go out of body, the spirit world is right there with you.
You just brought up apports and things coming through to our physical reality. So do you think when people are physically abducted, they're going to a different reality? Do you think that's where their physical self goes? Just like we receive apports or, a chunk from a craft or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's very curious. I can't quite figure it out because they're not there. They're not in the physical reality. Perhaps they went up into a vibrational level, a different dimension, this sort of thing.
Aside from the apport I received with my second sighting last year, I have these moments where I feel like I'm out of body, or I feel like I was in that in between. And then I'll wake up, and I used to blame my dog for this over and over again. And he never slept in my bed, but I would have things in my bed like leaves or grass. And I know I didn't physically leave my house. And so I felt like these things maybe came back with me.
Yeah, we usually look at that as a sign of ET abduction, so to speak,
But
but maybe it's something else.
I'm one of those that I've never had that bad abduction experience. I've never felt like I was taken by beings. I've filed more in the I've been shown things category than I don't feel like I was ever physically taken. So
Can I maybe?
I think Nancy wants to speak to this.
Yeah,
Nancy,
I want to. Yeah, I would want to bring Nancy in as well. Nancy, in terms of tell people when you had the bad experience on board the ship, what Mr. told you in terms of how to think about it. And the second thing is that the being that you saw, Mr., you've seen three. First, you saw him as a reptilian, then you saw him as a human being, and then you saw him as an etheric, sort of an energy being. So the being itself is changing its actual structure. There is no real one type of physical structure. He can change to whatever he wants. Is that correct?
Nancy,
Nancy, you're muted. We can't hear you. Yeah.
Okay. This out-of-body question is it with or without intention? And the answer is it's both. This collapse of space-time. I call it a tap-in. One time Mr. wanted, it was time for me to meet with him. And I was instructed to lay on the couch. Now my body stayed here, but I was tapped in and I was taken on board the ship. And that's when I, this particular time, saw the angelic beings. So my physical body was here. And as far as the actually being on board, yes, really being on board. I was missing them. There were police looking for me. This was the Novi incident, the Novi, Michigan incident, when I was 12 years old, and my girlfriend Cindy was on board with me. And this was in real time. You, Grant, you had wanted me to answer what he had told me. Mr., who was the pilot, as I saw it, looked just like a human. And he told me to find the positive in every perception throughout life. There's always a positive, no matter how dire or awful something is, there's always the positive. And you can't have one without the other. And you can't have these out-of-body experiences. They're both.
Because that's where you gave him the name. Remember, you put your hands on your hips and said, "Mr., why did you let them do this to me?" And what did he say to you? Because you had a traumatic experience with the Greys, and you were the first American to encounter the Greys before Beatty and Barney Hill. And so, what does he say to you about this traumatic event with the Greys?
Well, the Greys did some horrible things. You know, I think when you start out, you think of yourself as an abductee, and it was very frightening. There were 3 Greys. And they did a laparoscopy on me, which didn't exist until the 80s. And this happened in 1961. And they downloaded me with information through a rod, is what I called it at the time. And as I was leaving, the nice one, who was the female on board, she was the only female on board. She was walking me back towards the pilot, and I was very angry. And I said, "Mr." And that's how he got his name, M.R. period, with respect. "Why did you let them hurt me?" And he looked at me with such love in his eyes. He wanted me to understand that they would never have hurt me. There was no pain. My pain was perceived. When I saw the needle going in my stomach, of course I perceived that as pain. But there wasn't. They had done something to me so that I wouldn't feel any pain. And I was told that I would get home, and would get home safely. And Mr. was in human form at this time, and very loving, and like a father. And he was telling me, you know, throughout life, you're going to have a lot of negativity. And I want you to always find the positive in every predicament that you're in. So this is what I try to do and how I try to live my life. And the time that I was on board through the tap-in, he was in energy form. He was the size and shape of who he is, but he was in an energy form, and there was a buzzing and an electrical energy. And I get that a lot when they visit me. My walls become electric, and this apartment becomes electric energy. You can see the fuzz off the walls.
Wow.
Hey, thanks.
Well, thank you, Nancy. Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to jump off sort of, because Nancy, you're reminding me right now the fact that your experience started when you were very young. And I think all of us maybe here in this room, if not most of us, had our experiences start when we were children. And here we are, you know, just in this small group at the snapshot of the community, right? Like most people or many people in our community had their experiences start when they were very young. So, I mean, myself included, like Desta, I was having spontaneous OBEs when I was a kid. I had two that stayed with me. I'm not going to describe them, but they were uncannily clear. It was an entirely holistic experience, and you know, all my senses were involved. And for that reason, to this day, decades later, I can still very clearly remember those two OBEs. So that made me think of what children are like, you know, the fact that there's probably a reason why so many of us start having our experiences when we're children. You know, our minds are very flexible, they're very open. We don't have judgments and perceptions and biases at the ready. We are so much less defensive, and we're more open and imaginative and creative. So that kind of makes me think of the work that you're doing, Wendy. And I want to ask you a bit more about that, because you're working with children and you're doing experiments on psychic sight. You're also doing the experiments yourself. And so is Rob Freeman, your friend and partner in this. You're studying it yourself, but you have been finding quite a large discrepancy in terms of the success of these experiments with regard to adults versus children. You know, children are able to adapt to this psychic skill so much more easily, quickly, effectively than adults are. So they're able, you're in an interesting position because you're working with kids in an unusual way. You're also using a methodology and a practice here in the awake world, as you might call it. I mean, I don't know if this is really reality. Do any of us really know? But, you know, let's just say we're all awake right now. So you're working with children wide awake, you know, in a room doing these experiments, yet they're able to send their minds off to, you know, in different directions and have their consciousness perceive of things that are physically in front of them. So I want to ask you to detail that a little more, but also if you could talk about the potential that this has for things like being able to intentionally have an OBE, being able to intentionally contact extraterrestrials, because you know, we have this generation of what seems to be starseed children, indigo children, you know, children that are being born now are different in some ways, many people say, than children in previous generations, and that could be for a reason. So all of this, as Preston was referencing, and all of us know that, you know, all of these things are interconnected. So I was just thinking about all of this and how this connects to your work. Could you please talk a bit about the psychic sight experiments that you're doing and what the potential is there?
Well, it's very interesting, actually. I just learned just recently about a young boy, and kids can see right away. You put the mask on them, they can immediately see. They can walk around and do whatever they want with totally covered eyes. Just recently, I learned of this little boy who couldn't read with his eyes. Like he wasn't able to read with his eyes. He puts the mask on and he can read with the mask on. That really blew my mind. And the father was just so excited. He said he couldn't believe it either, that this little boy could read. So our experiments is, I think with the young kids, they have they have such an imagination and everything that they can just do this automatically. As adults, we have so much going on. We have you know, all our bills and all that stuff. And it's really hard you have to calm your mind and relax and be open to it. got to believe that it's possible to happen. And I've found, like, I've astral projected, I've gone out of body, I've done this work with the mask. And to me, it all seems the same. It's the same experience to me. When I'm wearing the mask, if I see something, like I could see Rob walk across the room, but with the mask on. But it was the same as when I went to my girlfriend's in Romania. It was the same experience. But as an adult, I have good days and bad days where I can actually do it and other days I can't. Sometimes I can see everything, sometimes I can't. And I think it all depends on how much you have in your mind or how much you have going on. But you have to just clear it and do it. But it seems to be all the same to me. But
Can I ask a question real quick? Have you noticed that with your students, whether they're children or adults, that building on this sight skill set, has it maybe opened the door a bit wider? Has anybody reported other noetic experiences like the downloads or things along those lines, or is it just based around the extra sight perception?
Well, I know with InfoVision, they talk about growing new connections in your brain. Mm-hmm. And in some ways they say that it helps with like the little boy that can actually read blindfolded, but he can't without the blindfold. I think it does. For me, it did. I was getting downloads. I was getting some before I started doing the mask work. I can say that I get more now, and I've been able to, because of wearing the mask, I've been able to send my consciousness to different places and see different things. Because when I'm wearing the mask, I send myself to the object to see it. So when I'm training people, I'll tell them, send your consciousness to that card or send your consciousness to that room and see that. So to me, it's all connected.
Wow.
So
yeah,
can I jump in there? Just I want to make a promotion here. Wendy, that we had the contact with Seth and his sister and Leona, who's doing the training and stuff like that. And they talked about the fact that they can hear, they can see small print upside down.
Yes.
They're intuitive. Where they were talking to the grandfather, what was wrong with his tractor, they both picked it up.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately. It was this gas leak and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always want to encourage, because I encourage them to start an Olympic team, because she had a bunch of kids and they all have uniforms. So I'm encouraging Nicole and all the Americans to get an Olympic team together. And we have a competition of these young kids. It's the most fascinating thing you've ever seen in your life. These kids going through an obstacle course that they're so proud. They're 10, 12, years old, and they're going through this course, writing stuff down and picking up, counting money and stuff like that. It's I think it would change the world, but it sort of ties into this whole thing of what kind of potential do we have? And that's where you see what people are talking about today, this potential of being able to see things, fly the craft, see in 360 degrees, stuff like that. I think it's the same sort of things that are being discussed with the blindfold, that we are just missing a whole part of how the world actually works.
And I know when I wear the mask, sometimes you were talking about hearing. When I wear the mask, if I don't see it, sometimes I'll hear it. Like one time Rob put down credit cards and he said, and then he said, I've got 3 credit cards. I took 3 of them away and he said, which one did I put on the table? And I'm wearing the mask and I heard Walmart. And so I said, Walmart. And he goes, yes, it is. So it's like.
Wow.
Yeah. It's just crazy. Yeah. And Leona's kids are amazing, but most kids can get it. Most kids just, immediately get it. So.
Wow, that is bananas. I just wanted to hop over to Gerard for a second, because I saw him nodding his head maybe a couple of minutes ago. You were relating to something, Gerard. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to pop in. It was.
I can't remember what it was now, but there's been a lot of things I've related to. I mean, Desta mentioned the body, and I don't look back at my body when I'm out. I don't even consider my body, and that may be why I can stay out for extended periods, because once you start considering the body, you're back in it. You know what I mean? So that's one thing. Someone mentioned teleportation, Preston. Yeah, teleportation is a big thing. And when I learned to teleport, the first teleportation I'd done was into space. And that was quite a shocking thing. And it was a case of focusing. And I closed my eyes and I felt movement. And Ron mentioned the G-force when he was flying the craft. And I felt the G-forces and movement. And then I found myself in space. And I was in space looking at the Earth. And I thought, I should be cold now. I'm in space. And all of a sudden, a warmth came over my body. So there's an intelligence interacting in the mind. Other things, like you consider things that you want. For example, I'm asking beings to show themselves to me. And in the next night or two, they will. So you can make requests, and quite often them requests will come true. Like, for example, asking to get closer to spirit. My head hits the pillow, and then I sit up and I sat at a table, and I get a message to put my hands on the table, and a spirit being will be along shortly to hold my hands. I sit there, that goes dark. As it gets very dark, I panic and pull away and pull myself back to body. So things that you request, you often get. Yeah. That's another important factor.
Let me butt in here real quick. I just thought of asking everybody who has flown a craft, what has your craft looked like? And Preston, I think in your presentation at MegaCon, I even heard you say you made a craft appear, like you've manifested a craft. So I'd like to hear everybody's opinion or correlating thoughts. The craft I fly, which was hard for me to correlate with my UFO sighting, was I don't see a craft. I could see like fuzzy edges, like I know I'm in something, but it's completely transparent. So I would just like everybody's craft.
Well, my still on. I may as well tell you my craft while I'm on. Well, for me, I had the downloads first, and Ron mentioned symbols. And I know other contactees like Tress Blair, who I speak to quite regular, she had symbols, right? So I started getting downloads, and they were downloads of symbols in 8-second bursts, and it was repeating for about 20 minutes in the hypnagogic phase. I'd wake up and it's to see the symbols flashing from one to another.
Have symbols? Will you just raise your hand? How many people get symbols here? Okay.
Well, these symbols kept coming, and anyway, that was prior to the craft experience. I had no idea what these symbols were for, but they're very intelligent. There's always a reason why these things happen. And it was a couple of weeks later, I had the craft experience. Now, I'd just like to stipulate it was out of body. My ears have just gone then. That's another sign of communication. So, I go to bed. I've only got an hour and a half sleep because I'm up for work very early. And my head is the pillow. I'm out of body. I'm stood with a group of people invited onto the craft. Somebody comes and tells us to follow her. She had long grey hair, tied back, red flight suit. Follow me, she said. So I just followed. I'm a bit shocked, but I'm out of body and I'm in control. So we got the craft was, I'd say it was a typical, I would say a Damsky looking craft with windows. Nothing fancy, fairly large. We went on board up the ramp, and somebody placed a hand on the panel and the craft took off. So I'm watching now. I'm looking out the window. We go up. I can see the city around, the lights, and I'm sort of edging. Can I fly the craft? So I'm putting my hand up. Can I fly? And she said, "Yeah, you're next. You have a go." So she hands me this laminate card with the symbols on. So I'm now looking at the symbols. I place my hand on the panel. I read the symbols, and nothing happens. I'm quite disappointed at this stage. And then she said to me, "Have another go." She said, "Have another go. Don't panic." So I read the symbol, and I remember one of them was a bird. And I remember a few of the shapes. So I'm holding the panel. I felt I'm not supposed to stat. I felt something, and I connected. I knew I was given permission to the craft to connect with me. So then I'd done what the other bloke had done. I raised the craft probably a few hundred meters, went a bit higher, turned the craft round. I could see 360 degrees all around for miles, absolute miles, anything I wanted to see. And I thought, shall I whiz off here? I thought, I feel like I'm comfortable. I could whiz off here and go, for a bit of I thought, no, I'm going to get in trouble. So I landed the craft and everyone was clapping, and it was funny because the next thing I'm on a couch, a sofa, as you people call it. And I'm in a hangar and I can see the craft through the window still. And I wake up on this sofa, but the being I mentioned previously, the hide with the hood, he was stood in the corner. Oh, the other human looking in the flight suits were stood in the other corner. So I'm now thinking, what's he doing here? Is he watching over me? Is he with them? I had no idea. And telepathically, I said, come closer, don't be afraid, to him. And before I knew it, he was stood over the top of me. And all I seen was this black glove coming towards my head. And he placed his hand on my head. And someone mentioned before the oneness, and I felt it once before in a visitation. And he placed his hand on my head, and it was as if I just had morphine put into me. It was a suddenly universal oneness. And it was amazing. And I was so relaxed. I initiated an OPE, which I was already in a note. And so my awareness shifter fell through the sofa into the room below. And I was now thinking, right, I'm going back up there. I'm going to sort this out. I want the cure for cancer. I want this. I want that. I was making my way back. And then all of a sudden I got pulled out of it by my alarm clock going off. And I was really disappointed, and I was driving to work fuming, thinking I was so close. But yeah, that was a basic idea of Maya. There's more to it than that. Yeah. But the important thing for me is the being was there with the hood again. So I'm still trying to figure out, who are you? And a couple of weeks ago, I was having an OBE flying over, and I seen 3 with hoods up stood by a lake. And I thought, I better get away from here. I'm going to fly the other way. So I started flying in a different direction. And I looked and he was coming behind me. And he caught up with me and he was level with me and he pulled his hood down. And that was the being I showed you with the extraterrestrial face. But I wasn't scared, but so he's now got to the point where he's shown me who he is. So I'm hoping we're going to get some more communication. But I think the voice I get a lot of the time is actually him anyway. I mean, for example, I had one experience where I flew up into the sky and I said, God, give me your best advice. What is your advice for me? And it said, Gerard, in that voice, Gerard, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then I wake up in the bed, and so this voice I get quite a lot is, it's probably him, I don't know. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in there. But that was the craft experience. But just before I go off this, a few weeks later, now a lot of my OBs, I don't initiate. I do some of them, and some of them I find myself out. They're the guided journeys. So I find myself out of body on the rear of the house on the decking. So I thought I'll go for a nice evening flight. So I fly off, not this time. I get stunned. I get stopped midair. So I'm now stuck. I think this isn't right. Who's holding me? I'm on a tractor beam here. And the voice comes through. The voice comes through in the ear. The same voice, Gerard, they want to see you. So I'm thinking, oh no, son, you're not seeing me. So I attempted a teleportation to Jupiter. I don't know why, Jupiter. Just someone to get away. And then I ended up, I don't think I made the teleportation on that occasion. I woke up. So again, I'm kicking myself thinking, give me another chance. Give me another chance, So I will get another chance. But it's a case of, that's how I shouldn't have pulled away from that. I should have went with it. But I just started thinking, abduction and greys. But that wouldn't have been what it was anyway. They were quite civilized. I think for an astral projector, they're a bit more civilized. You go to them. It doesn't, and the question before about abductions, that's a difficult question to ask about physical abductions. But like Preston, I do think there are physical abductions. And I think there's non-physical. And obviously I prefer the later myself, but yeah. So that's all I wanted to add.
Preston, have you flown the ship, Preston?
I don't think so. I can't say that I have, but Nicole's comment really kind of struck a chord with me. Like, you don't see any walls, or it's like everything's invisible. I hear that so often from experiencers. They say it's like being inside this UFO. When they're in the pilot seat, it's like Wonder Woman's jet. The walls just completely disappear.
I know I'm not in a chair And I know like everybody talks about these panels. I know I place my hands on something and it's almost like my feet are even locked into a place too. But from that moment, it's like I'm one with it, whatever it is. But ever since I heard you say you manifested a craft, I was like, well, am I supposed to pick what it looks like? Like, is that a step I don't know about? Like, so.
No, I think you're doing just fine. It's definitely very much connected to consciousness. People who fly these craft do it, you know, with their mind.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's going on here. I was also struck by how you call it the in-between place.
Yeah.
Because I approached my sister once and she was out of body. I could tell it was her. And I'm like, hey, you know, you're out of body, right? And she says, oh yeah, I'm in the in-between place. I'm like, really?
It
And
feels in between. Like I felt that I kept in my out of body experience. It's like I was answering somebody, but I felt like I was answering myself. I was like, oh, I'm going back to my body and I've been through this before. You know, it was that sort of, and the answers to everything where it's like everything and nothing all at once. You're like, I know.
Yeah, when I'm out of body, I start to forget to this physical world. I'm like, oh, this is where I actually live. This is the real world. But going back to, you know, with my sister, I'm like, oh, you're in the in-between place. Okay, will you remember this? She said, no. I said, how can you say that? I mean, we're here right now. She says, I just don't have that ability. And that's when I manifested this UFO, because what you think you can create. And I created this beautiful UFO. And we were both impressed. She did
it
not
look like a Domsky's too?
It was a gorgeous chrome silver craft with colored lights and a dome. It was a classic saucer. But yeah, I mean, when you're out of body, it feels physical often. You can touch things. You know, I've swam in the water. You can feel the water. It doesn't get you quite wet. When I pop out of body, someone mentioned this in the chat room, like, do you fly through power lines? It took me a while to gather up the courage to do that, but I did it. Flew right through the power lines and felt a buzzing sensation. And there was a flash of light. Took me a while to walk through walls, but I did that, and you can feel it as it moves through you. Finally, I came up on a brick wall. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep my eyes open. Never done that. I always close my eyes. And I walked through this brick wall with my eyes open, and I'm like, wow, that was an experience. So there's a weird, I don't know, there's gradations of what we would call physical, I think, because you definitely feel physical, or you certainly can.
Can I ask you about windows, Preston? About going through windows? I tend to sit in the middle of the window and have a bit of a, just because you can.
It's like diving into a water, there's a surface tension for sure. And I bounced right off walls. I'm like, bam. and I'm like, what? I can't get through it. Because I think sometimes when you're out of body, you're at different levels of vibration. And if you raise your vibration really high, you have no problem. Now I can just go through physical stuff. I don't even feel it.
Yeah, Preston, I'd like to jump off what you're saying because you're leading directly towards the last question I want to ask. Just before we take a couple of questions from the chat from people who are viewing this panel and apparently really enjoying it, which is fantastic. So you just brought up a couple of things. One is, you know, is this physical? How physical is it? Where is the physicality kind of thing? But then also vibration. So with OBEs, it's been documented there's a vibrational state of about 200 megahertz. But then, you know, monks who were studied at the University of Wisconsin, of course, this information is coming from Grant. I can take no credit for this info. It's coming from Grant, okay? Monks who were studied at the University of Wisconsin, they were documented as vibrating at 100 megahertz. But then Bashar, who personally I love, he's a favorite of mine. When he's channeling, when Daryl Enka is in a state of channeling Bashar, there's a vibration of 40 to 50 megahertz. So, you know, we know theoretically that vibration is important. We know that, you know, quantum physicists have been telling us for a very long time that vibration is important, that everything is made of vibration, everything is made of energy, right? So here we are in this conversation talking about how it is a common experience in this group, but also outside of it, because again, we're a snapshot of the population, right? This field that we're all involved in. that people are able to easily move through solid surfaces. They're able to easily leave solid surfaces. They're able to easily leave their physical bodies. And then, you know, Nancy was talking earlier about watching her body, actually witnessing her body rematerializing, right? So there's this sort of ongoing discussion of what is solid, what is physical really? And is it all perception or are things actually physical? So with that kind of background context in mind, this is my question. Kit Green talks about, you know, these beings popping in and out, teleporting in and out. We are all right now talking about this experience of basically popping in and out, right? Popping in and out of our bodies, popping in and out of this dimension, popping in and out of our understanding, our perception. So are we popping out or are we popping in? What is going on? Are we outside of our experience thinking that we're inside it? And when we go somewhere else, as Preston was saying, and everybody was nodding, when we go to this other place, all of us have experienced this, that's what feels like home, right? That's what feels like the true nature of who we really are. Everybody here knows that and has had that experience. So are we outside of that trying to get in? Or are we inside it and then traveling out and having other experiences? What do you think? Because this is such a big question. It's such a juicy one. It's tied to any part of this topic, any part of this field, right? This is kind of the underlying question. What is real? So what do you think? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first because I'm actually going to have to take off shortly. I have another appointment. So let me just say real quick. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, astral projection is a misnomer. And I think the physical world is absolutely composed of thought. It's just at a lower vibration. It's crystallized. It feels solid, but you know, physics tells us it's not. We know it's pure energy. So I used to be a materialist. And it occurred to me, like, even if everything is material, it has to be or it doesn't exist. And I still kind of feel that way. Everything is just gradations of vibrations and octaves, and it's all in the same place. And when we're going out of body, we're not really leaving our body. We are, because all our bodies are connected. It's not just the physical body, it's the etheric body, the astral body, the mental body, the Buddhic body. I mean, according to Eastern tradition, there's 7 bodies going all the way up to the highest vibration. So it's all one. And this brings us back to this feeling of oneness. We are all connected. Individuality itself is kind of an illusion. We are just different manifestations of the same source energy. So we're not really going anywhere. It's all just exploration and fractals and moving our consciousness through it and expanding. And when we're in the physical, it's a great experience. There are lessons here we cannot experience on the other side. But really, we're all one. We're all connected and we're not going anywhere. We're just together.
Indeed. And Preston, I just want to give some credit to that beautiful phrase that you used, gradations of vibration. I love that. And that makes me think of why music is such an important contact modality, right? And why that's such a trigger, because that is what music is. It's gradations of vibration, and that helps us. It transforms us, it teleports us, it takes us somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to recognize that beautiful phrase.
Yeah, music on the other side is so awesome. The colors, oh, I just can't describe. But yeah, I do have to go. I'm so sorry, guys.
Tell us about your book before you go. Give us the name of your book, because you've actually done a book on your out-of-body experiences. We'll have to interview you on it. And you did a presentation that I saw for 90 minutes, which was unbelievable, the amount. So tell us about your book before you leave.
Yeah, it's called Out of Body Exploring, a Beginner's Approach. Thanks, Nicole. And it explores my experiences from 1988, right when I started investigating UFOs, all the way to 2003. And I'm going to put together another book, because boy, the experiences I'm having now are just beyond. Visiting Area 51, clearing my house of ghosts, visiting the lower hellish realms. Going out of body with another person, visiting enlightened masters and getting messages. It's crazy the stuff you can do. The past life, Nancy talked a lot about that. That will happen to you if you go out of body, for sure. You will rescue lost souls. I mean, it's unlimited and it's so much fun. Please try it. Who's ever listening to this show, I know there's hundreds of you out there. You got to try this. You absolutely are missing the boat if you don't. It is so much fun. And that would be my closing comment.
Beautiful.
Preston, I think your lecture at MegaCon is also available now, like online, and you touch on a lot of what you just said. So go online and buy that DVD copy. I brought one home with me, so.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I'm going to take off now.
Thanks, Preston. And Ron, you haven't jumped in a while. Let's let you.
And Ron has a book coming too. Ron, talk about your book. Oh, he's muted.
There. Got it. Had to click the button. Yeah, I'm writing a process of writing a book. I'm almost finished with it. I just got to figure out how to put it together, though. I'm going to call it A Million Miles. Walking a Million Miles.
Wow.
About my abduction experiences and other paranormal aspects associated with it. Hopefully it'll be out soon.
Great.
We'll definitely help you get that out.
Okay.
Desta, I didn't know if you've been following the chat, but I've watched and found a few questions. Have you been taking note of any questions from our chat room?
I haven't. No.
Well, here's one that's just for everybody. There's a question where people are wanting to know that with your out-of-body experiences, have you ever been able to go into another body? Or is another body always a past life?
With me, I have never been into another body, but I don't know if I should go into this, but vivid dreams, I believe vivid dreams are also a part of this phenomena. But in dreams, I have had entities, grays, take my soul out of my body and put me into different animal bodies. And they told me that I have to experience this. And that's the only way just in a vivid dream.
Wow.
Can I add something to that?
Please do, yes.
Yeah, well, the only time I've been into another body, I mean, the being I've described is the hooded being who's now not hooded because he's obviously pulled his hood down and hopefully it'll stay that way. He allowed me to view through his eyes. I mean, this is just a little nap I had in the chair, and when I opened my eye, well, I didn't actually open my eyes. I was seeing through his eyes, and I was looking at his location, and I could see through his mind. And there was a hologram of the earth was shown to me, and he said to me, "Your life to me, Gerard, is about 2 weeks long." He says, he explained the transition. He said, "You will die." He says, "It will just be a transition of energy." He said, "Don't worry." He explained a few more things about it. It'll be like when you go on holiday, you make new friends, and then you say goodbye at the airport. It'll be like that. He says, nothing to fear. And that's what he explained to me. But yeah, I was viewing through his eyes and seeing through his mind. So again, I was quite privileged to have that experience. So the being who was on the craft as well, and he took me to the inner earth, and now he's flying alongside me, pulling his hood back, and so I feel like we're getting a bit closer, and I'm hoping I'll get more answers off him. But like all these things, it's when they're ready, they will. You can't force these things. But like we said before, it's they will decide. We're here because we're supposed to be here. We're exactly where we need to be. That's how I understand.
Can I ask a question? Because Ron had this. I think you had the same thing. Ron talked about when Elby said, when he saw you in the hospital, he said, next time I come, I'm taking you home. Do you think that the beings have a part of a process in our lives going from one life to another? Do you think they follow us between lives, or is this just a one-time thing? Are they part of the process of living and dying?
Well, go on. You go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
No,
Start, Ron.
Go on, Ron.
I believe that they are a part of your whole entire existence, past lives, future lives. They're there with you, 100%.
Yeah, I believe the same. The other guides I've had interactions with have been told that, well, they told me that I'm an ascended master, and he's told me he's an ascended master. He's quite malevolent at times, but they've been with me for many lifetimes, is what I've been told. And this isn't the hooded being, this is somebody else.
Is this where the whole past life, future selves, higher self, primal self,
we're part of a continuum, aren't we?
Future, everything now at once. Is this where this comes into
definitely play? I'm nodding because it's true. We're part of a continuum of energy.
He wants to talk to you.
Nancy wants to jump in as well. Nancy, go ahead.
One of the messages I was given early on is no matter what form we are in, our consciousness is always our consciousness. It goes into every life, past life, present life, future life. Our consciousness is always our consciousness. And this is early, and a lot of people aren't going to graduate. We are. But, and I forgot to say something else that Mr. had told me that was so important when I asked him why they allowed the beings to hurt me, about love. He told me that through love is the only way that we can perceive our as positive. And I just want to put this in here. When Werner von Heisenberg was dying, he said to Carl von Weizsäcker, quote, "It is so very easy. I did not know this before. I see now that physics is of no importance. The world is an illusion."
Beautiful.
I often jump to this Eastern way of thinking of seeing Shiva and Shakti, that dance of Shiva and Shakti, everyone around us. And I think it was mentioned earlier too, that golden rule that applies. And sometimes with these scarier experiences and the abduction scenario, it almost makes me wonder, based on perception, if we need to be able to feel that fear or that pain to be able to see it and be empathetic in others so we can recognize it. So beautiful, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Desta, you're smiling. Do you want to jump in with anything? No? How about you, Wendy?
Why don't we put forth some of the questions from the chat? I think Nicole and you collected a couple of them earlier. Do you want to start with those too?
I asked one before, if anybody else wanted to add if they've ever been out of body and gone into another body. So Ron shared his animal experience. So I think I can move on to the next one.
Go to the next one. Yeah.
They're wanting to know if anybody has experienced a wall of light before an OBE or a vortex or both.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we've had massive orbs and balls of light in the home, and my wife, Margaret, came into the bedroom while I was sleeping. And she said she'd never seen such a massive ball of light, like a beach ball size of ball of light that lit the whole room up. And she claims that it was her mum visiting her, and I claim, well, it was for me. So we both tried to claim the ball of light, but I don't. So that, I mean, I don't know. We've had a lot of orbs and phenomenon, as well as the other energy beings, dark energy beings. They're dark, but that doesn't mean to say that they're bad. I mean, I was woken by one poking me in the back. And when I turned around, it fled. But I don't think, if I'd have viewed it in an out-of-body state, it might have looked totally different. So But yeah, I was still terrified. Like, but there you go. Yeah, but that's my only experience with a ball of
Yeah,
light.
I've had a couple. The orange orb that came into my bedroom, it lit up the whole bedroom, and then it just shrunk. And we made a MUFON report on this. This was years ago. And then I just posted an orb that Doug Old blew up for me that I had seen in the summer of 2018, and it's beautiful. In fact, I videoed it for 1 minute. I was watching it for a minute and yelling at it.
I have never seen the vortex of light, but what I see is more like a line. And then I'm kind of in that. I think I equate it more to what Desta describes in a theta state. It's like I feel myself dip. And then a lot of times that's where that like light line is, but sometimes it's almost like a rainbow, like I'm seeing a prism effect instead of just a colored light. So Ron, did you have any kind of light experience before you go in the in-between?
Yeah, one time, my very first encounter, OBE I had in 1975, I had gone to bed and became paralyzed, and I felt myself get up out of bed, and I don't know what's going on. I'm standing right in the middle of my bed, looking at me laying on the bed, but there was a big, bright amber light that shone through the, it was coming right through the curtains, everything right through the window, right into my bedroom. And other than that, the only light experience I've had was with my encounters with Elby. It would always start out, I would go to bed, and then I would see a pillar of light would appear between the ceiling and the floor, and it would slowly move across the room. And it was like a calling card, be prepared, we're coming for you.
Wow.
And they just as a little side note, they've actually taken you to see Sasquatch, correct?
Well, he did. This is a weird one. My first partner that I had in the paranormal, we do ghost hunting and Sasquatch research and stuff. And he was a well-known Sasquatch researcher from Salt Lake. And he contacted ALS and died. And just before he died, I interviewed him. And he told me that if there's any way possible, he's going to come back and see me. And I said, I won't expect anything less. And so I think it was about 3 months after he died, I got this dream, and he appeared to me in this dream. It was a vivid dream. And he told me, all he said was, be prepared. Something wonderful is going to happen to you.
Okay.
Be prepared. And that's all he'd say. So I didn't think much, a whole lot about it. And I think it was about a month after that, I had this dream where a Sasquatch came to me and he took me to this cave and he introduced me to his family. And I was thinking that's what he wanted me to be prepared for, but it wasn't. It was about another 2 months after that, I had a Bigfoot sighting, and I think that's what he was preparing me for. And it happened to be the day that I didn't have any of my cameras with me or anything. So I blew that one big time.
It's got to be an exciting life for everybody here. Do you find that you it's sort of like a mission that you would do it again if you had the chance, that you've had this has been a wonderful experience? Can I go across the board that people would say that this has been, a lucky time for you?
It's exciting. I loved it. And I actually would even meditate and pray for the mysteries of God to be witnessed, you know, so I could witness them. And I tell you, it's been a blessing. It has. The things I've encountered, the things I've saw, it's unbelievable.
We are
Ask and
fulfilling
you
our
shall
missions.
receive. Just be prepared, because you're going to see a lot, and you better have a strong mind.
I like what Nancy just said. We're fulfilling our missions, and
Yes, we
it
are.
reminds me of what you say often lately is don't forget there's lessons along the way. You
That's
will
right.
be slammed into those lessons
Mhm.
until you accept them and, you know, move beyond it, I think. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah,
else? Anybody
yeah.
else
I'd
find
just
it?
like to add, yeah, it is very exciting. Sometimes I do look forward to going to bed, which is quite sad, really, isn't it? But, but I mean, I'd like to share the experience, and I may just touched on a couple of experiences tonight, but it is phenomenal, and I'd just love to share it with other people. And I don't know where it's going for me personally. There's been that many different things going on. But yeah, going to bed's an amazing, and if you set the intention, a lot of the time it will happen. I mean, I requested them to show me the true form, and then that night they appear to me like a translucent being appears, and again I wake up screaming, as I always let myself down. And the next day I say, give me another chance, you know, I won't do it. Next time I won't scream, because until I bridge the barrier and get used to seeing these beings, and I can't move to the next stage and actually get some information out of them. So I consider myself an explorer of consciousness.
I know. One time
And that's
literally
that's what I do. I love it.
I'm scared.
Oh yeah, I've been scared, but it doesn't stop me doing it. As I said, I've been hit, I've been attacked, and we've had an infestation in the home. But you know, it's going somewhere, and it's good.
Does everybody here feel like a part of their mission is to talk about it with others?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been told it is.
Yeah.
I've been told that initially it'll be a one-to-one thing, and in the future it'll be a one-to-many thing. And my mission is if I accept the mission, or well, let's get this right. It's up to me if I want to do it. I don't have to do it, but yeah, it's to spread the message, heal people's hearts, and make people aware of what's coming. The same message, everybody.
Right there. People aware of what's coming. I think a lot of us at some point accepted that whatever we're doing now isn't for the now, it's for the future.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think the signal's got stronger. I think the signal is getting stronger, and there's more people being woken up. I think there's evidence of that. I do.
Yeah, I feel like everything that I'm going through right now won't be appreciated or understood until after my demise. And so it's lonely, but
Grant often compares this to biblical times, like being in the time of Jesus. And I'm like, well, they didn't really know that was the time until like 500 years later. Like they did, but they didn't know they were in it. So, you know, it's beyond. And there's always the pain and suffering and all the things that it takes to get through it, the fortitude to keep spreading the message. So I think we all have that fortitude time and again. I think we keep pushing our voice forward. So Grant,
it's possible that we are the generation that will break the veil, isn't it? You know what I mean? We could be the ones. There's no reason to say that we're not. Although you think, well, why weren't the last generation? Why didn't they do it? But there's that much going on right now that we could be the ones. You know, you've got to be positive.
Being given the tools as well. It's like,
I think so.
You guys need to talk with others across the globe. Here's the internet. Like, there's just this evolution of spreading the word too. So, Grant,
I appreciate. Well, we should maybe shut it down, but I want to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate people, because I think this is more important a message than the UAP task force report, because that's about sightings That's about 1947. It's like the way I describe it now is like I've been at this 47 years, and it's like let's discuss sightings, and it's like no, that's grade one. I don't want to do grade one for the 47th time. I think that's why the people on this panel today are so important. Is this is beyond the sightings? Okay, let's get over it. As Jacques Vallée said, Nimitz was a sighting 15 years ago. It's time to get over it. Let's move to the next step. And I think that's the message that the people on this panel bring is this is much more complex than sightings. This is, it's got to do something with reality, with consciousness. And I think the message that you have is not just I saw a UFO sighting, it's I actually encountered the beings, the intelligence behind the phenomenon. That's what I say. If you want to know what UFOs is about, you've got to talk to the people who are interacting with the phenomena. It doesn't help to look at lights in the sky. So that's why I so appreciate people coming on today and sharing their stories, because I think you are on the leading edge. And that's what, if you saw how I posted to Facebook, I said, this is critically important, the stories these people are going to tell. This is what they tell the black ops guys after they get the initial initiation. Then they start telling them what this is all about. And what it's about is what people on this panel today are talking about, the fact that it's not as physical a world as you think it is. It's much more complex, 1,000 times more complex. And there is a some sort of force, intelligence that's interacting with us. And you are you are like the messiahs that they have picked to spread the message. So I appreciate your sharing it, because sometimes it's not easy to come forward. And as we did with the Chinese people last night, some people take great risk at coming forward and telling their story. And I appreciate people who have decided to come forward. I think the message that's coming out today is a very important message that people should pay close attention to. I will guarantee you this is where it's going to go after we get over the nonsense about UFO sightings.
I just want to add to what you just said, Grant. I mean, I'm looking at the chat right now, and there are people who are reiterating what you just said, you know, thanking everybody who's been here today and saying that it's given them more confidence and they feel more able to speak out without feeling shamed or ridiculed. And they're so glad that these communities are growing, right, and expanding. That's one good use for the internet. So, you know, there's already a lot of appreciation just in the comments right here, and this will be seen by many more people after this. So yes, having these conversations is unbelievably important. Having the community is unbelievably important, and we need to make it more and more global. Let's bring in more diversity of voice from all over the world and share experiences, you know, again and again, so that we can create a tighter web of connectivity around this incredibly important topic at this crucial time in our history. How lucky are we to be here, right? It looks like it's a scary world out there, but there are some incredible things going on, and we get to be part of it. So thank you so much for everybody for being here. Thanks everyone in the chat for all your appreciation. And Nicole, you're an awesome co-host. Desta, superstar as always. Grant, we would not be here without you. And the panelists, thank you so much for being here to share your stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.